Hey everyone, it's Cary, Kolat, and Matt Dernlan with the podcast Away. Back for another episode this week, and I guess we're still in zombie land. That's what it feels like, Matt. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like Groundhog Day a little bit. I think it just seems, when this really gets real for me, because we've talked off the air, and like, I think you and I feel very fortunate to be able to work right now, and I'm blessed, man.
Yeah,
I enjoy it. I love it. I mean, I love to work. I mean, when I'm not working, it drives me crazy. So I'm very fortunate, but
yep,
really the reality really sets in on the weekends because I'm just focusing on what we can do, being safe. I mean, being smart, being safe as we all should. But when I come in and I get in this building, it's like getting in the wrestling room every day, man. You got to clear the mechanism. You got to get focused and locked in. Then you got to get after it. But it seems like it's the weekends where the reality of everything that's going on kind of hits you, and it's just kind of surreal. But yeah,
yeah,
it hasn't caused us to deviate. I mean, it hasn't altered our focus or what we're trying to do. Yeah, we're doing it a slightly different way, but it's what you got to do. Is that's kind of you're in that world right now. I mean, the way you're recruiting, the way you're presenting the program, everything you're doing, it's the same, but it's different, right?
yeah. It's totally different. I find myself at least like twice a week now. Not really at first, but now I'll just kind of roll back from my desk and be like, there's no team right now. Like there's nobody to go down and get on the mat with or work with. And I had a job years ago outside of wrestling, and it really was an office job. I never really saw the benefit of my product. And I was just answering emails and putting in sales orders and all this stuff. And that's kind of where I feel like I'm at right now. It's like, there's no team and I'm a physical person. My job is not 50-50 really. And it's desk time and there's mat time. And I have no mat time right now. So I feel like I'm back in the corporate world 100%. And it kind of kills me some days, but we're doing it. Listen, I don't follow, I don't follow stuff really online that much. And I'll see stuff, and some stuff just doesn't even interest me. It's not that it doesn't interest me or it's not my world. But I always have like tunnel vision, so whatever I'm working on, I have a very small scope that I deal with. Cause if I start putting more on my plate, I'm not good at multitasking. So I just stick what my focus is, and my keep the blinders on, right? So that being said, I was in the sauna the other day with Blaze Cabell, my assistant, and Dean Heil, and we were talking, and they were talking about this whole weight class thing. And it's actually, I told them I was going to steal their idea. They were laughing. But actually, this comes from them. And then we got into some conversation because I started asking them. I'm like, hey, I've seen all this stuff online about this change in the high school weights and stuff, and that's what they were talking about. I said, just fill me in. I said, what, we're changing them again for some reason, and we got into the weight class discussion. I don't know. Have you been following that at all?
I haven't. I've seen a little bit, but I'm kind of like you. Like, I think a lot of people right now with everything that's happening, they're looking for distractions. I'm kind of the opposite way. I'm actually getting more tunnel
Yeah,
vision. I'm closing everything out. Like, I don't want to be
yeah,
ignorant to the facts of what's going on, but I've actually zoned in even harder during this time. So I kind of
yeah,
heard about what's going on, but not really. I haven't really had time
yeah.
to dig in.
Well, I guess they want to cut the bottom weights out, right? They want to cut bottom weights out, so we're not going to have the 10, 106, 103s, whoever's, some people are doing different numbers still, and just shrink those bottom weight classes out. And they're saying there'll be less forfeits and stuff like that, and coaches are having a hard time filling the weight classes. And that's probably true in some areas. I think you go through trends. I don't know. It's probably true in some areas that you're having trouble with certain weight classes. But anyway, Blaze and Dean actually had a really good idea, and I don't know whose it is. I'm saying Blaze and Dean. It could just be all Blazes. Um, anyway, his thought process was pretty good. Keep the weights 103, 112, 119. And then when you get to the past 119, go straight college weights
Hmm.
for high school. And his rationale is like, look, he's like, think about it. First of all, we have a lot of little kids that are still out there wrestling. I was actually kind of thinking about with the weight class riders wrestling. I was like, you know what? He may struggle to be one of those 103 pounders. And if you take the weight class away from him, he probably will not wrestle.
Yeah.
So I was looking at that because now he's in that age group, right? And Blaze's, system and Dean's system, when we were talking about it, it's like, hey, that's really good. 103, 112, 119. You keep those smaller weights. Now, the reason you keep those smaller weights, and I've seen all kind of facts come out from different people, and I think the latest one was like 50 some percent of NCAA champions come from those first few weights. I don't know if you knew that.
Wow.
A kid would have wrestled 103 or 112, and he's going to go on to be an NCAA champion.
I mean, that makes sense.
Like,
I mean, how I think all of us, like, I know I was a lightweight. I stayed a lightweight, but
yeah,
I mean, but
yeah.
that's kind of the beauty of the sport. I think that's the uniqueness of the sport is like it does appeal to the smaller people like us.
Yeah. Well, I think and actually I did when I won Pennsylvania States as a freshman, I believe I was the heaviest freshman ever to win it at 119. Like I was actually at a bigger weight. Um, and I didn't even realize that. And people were kind of making a big deal of it. I didn't really realize what a big deal was. When I look back, most freshmen were going to win a high school state champion. It used to be 98 pounds. Then, when we went to 103, then 106 with some. So you're in those lower weights. John Hughes won it the year before me at 112. Now it's been, people have gone heavier than me in Pennsylvania now. There was a guy at Canonsburg, I think he won at like 140 something. Chance Marsteller was up there. Regardless, my point being is when you get back to the NCAA tournament, most NCAA champions, 50% of them are going to come from those. They're going to have to pass through those small weights. So if you eliminate those weights, now you totally change the facts here in the landscape of wrestling because that is a solid group of people. So Blaze's thing is 103, 112, 119, and then you go college weights, 25, 33, 41, because he said, think about it. Now we can actually recruit a kid. Instead of doing these 5-pound increments, if a kid has to cut 4.5 pounds, he might say, okay, I'm going to go to 141. But if he's in that bubble of 8.5 pounds, he's going to say, well, I might as well just go to 49, right? Those 5-pound increments really help. They don't take out weight cutting. I think you're promoting it because you're always within a realm of thinking which way you can go, right? So you spread the gap a little bit. The great thing about using those weights is I could watch a kid now his senior year wrestle 141, and I'm going to say he's going to be a 49 pounder now because he's going to grow. He's got another year growing. He's going to come to college. So you tie it all in with the college weights, but you still keep those first 3 weights. Now that takes out 220. And this is where we got in the debate in the sauna going back and forth. So if you weigh 103 pounds, what sports can you do?
Wrestle. I mean, you can run, you can wrestle, you could probably play soccer, but big fit like football, basketball, the mainstream sports, probably not many of the
The mainstream,
mainstream sports.
that's right. And I'm not a big sports fanatic. So I was thinking, oh, my mind for some reason thinking soccer players are small. And they're like, no. Some of the best soccer players are over 200 pounds and they can run. I was like, okay. So really, when you get to 220, these guys have tremendously more options to be an athlete because athletics, I guess, just naturally are geared to bigger, stronger athletes, And here's what I say, why it's not a big deal to lose 220. And those guys either go 97 or if the kid's at 220, well, I could look at a 220 pounder and say, we could put another 20 pounds of muscle on him. We could get him to 240 and he could be an agile heavyweight. But when you talk to those kids, every coach in the country will tell you, when you talk to a really good athlete, hey, how are you? You interested in our program? Yeah, I just trying to figure out whether I'm going to go football or wrestling. You know what I mean? Or they always naturally have more options. You don't call a kid who wrestled 125 or he's at 119 in high school and he's going to be a 25 pounder. He doesn't sit there and say, yeah, I'm thinking about football and wrestling. I don't know which one yet. Right. So you really cannot lose those bottom weights because wrestling caters to those kids. You can't take those out. And I haven't been in this discussion, but listening to Blaze and Dean talk about it, it's like, yeah, Brad, you're right. It makes a lot of sense. And I wasn't playing and like I said, I'm not a football guy. I don't sit around watching football and stuff like that. And so those guys do, and they're like, yeah, 220, he could play basketball. He could football, he could do track and field, if he's shot putter or something. Like there's so many more opportunities as a big guy. So eliminating 220, not that I want to eliminate any weights, but eliminating 220, that would be the one I'd get rid of. I would not get rid of those bottom weights. Because that kid has no option. And that's part of the duty of sports is teaching like a competitive nature. Every kid should be in sports. At the Naval Academy, I didn't know this. So we have 33 Division I sports. 33, that's a lot. Like, I don't even know all of them. I was walking down my hallway the other day and sprint football. You ever hear sprint football? I didn't know sprint football.
Is that like 7-on-7? And do you have
No,
to be,
it's
or do you have to be under a certain weight?
it's
I'm
like
trying to,
180, yeah, 180 pounds and down.
yeah.
Like they have a whole, and I don't know how many colleges carry sprint. I know I looked on their
I,
thing and they
I
played
think it's an Ivy,
Pennsylvania, so I know Pennsylvania University.
and it's an Ivy League thing too, right? Because a friend of mine
Yeah,
who was an AD at Cornell, he was actually in charge of the sprint football team. So I think it's more of an Ivy
yeah.
East Coast type thing.
Yeah. Well, at the Naval Academy, yeah, not everybody's a Division I athlete, right? There are kids that going there, they're going to serve, they're going to be an officer, they're going there for the education and the leadership they're going to get from it. But at 3:45 every day, they're required to do some kind of sports activity. So there's tons of clubs. So we have an ice hockey club that I know about. They have a wrestling club. That for those who aren't on the wrestling team. But because they say that's part of leadership and is building a competitive nature is being a leader as well. So they require you to do some kind of activity, whether it's the formalized Division I athletics or club athletics. And that's what I think we have to realize. We have a bigger duty. We got to get out of this we got to fill all the weights. I want to fill all the weights too, but you also got to look at it and say what we can't take those opportunities away. Those small kids, like they don't have we're just going to run. Like, yeah, they can. You literally, there's only so many things they can do now. If a kid's 103 pounds, he can run track and field, right? He can do cross country or something, but he's not a big person. He doesn't have a long stride. I mean, yeah, I was sitting there thinking about like, what else can you do if you're that small?
Yeah, nothing. And to the way you were
Limited
explaining it,
opportunity.
yeah, limited opportunities. And I've never believed, I've always hated the term extracurricular activity. Like, because it seems like that's a bonus opportunity. Like you could take it or leave it. I'm like, no, sports is a life activity. It teaches you so many things, and you have to give those outlets. So when you look at those lightweights, typically those guys will grow. They're not going to stay at 103, right? It's a landing spot
Right.
to transition to other areas. But if you don't, if you deny him that opportunity completely, like you said with Ryder, he's out of the sport, man. And how are you going to deny such a thing? And the second thing that made sense that you were saying about the weight class, the college weight classes, that's our biggest challenge, or that was every coach's huge challenge. Like, where is this guy going to be? That's the difficulty. We've talked about it before because we're really one of the few weight class sports. Every other
Yeah.
coach is recruiting a position. And so, all right, is this guy a point guard? Or he's a wide receiver, running back? You kind of know what you're looking for there. And it's kind of built, the model is built for what you're looking for. Weight classes are hard to determine because you're looking at age, maturity, all these different variables to try and get to the point where you make an offer, like
Yeah.
an offer on a range. Like I think very few coaches say, "Oh, you're a 33 pounder, you're a 41 pounder." It's like, "Oh, I always took the position like you're in a range," and I gave him a range because there was staggered weight class that didn't match up to college weights. So it makes complete sense that
Yeah.
yes, and then to the 220 point, like if you really think about it, I'm not trying to slight any of you 220 pounders out there, but there's not a lot of true 220 pounders that stick right there. They're like you said, they're either a 97 pounder or they're a heavyweight. Like you have those 205, 210 guys that are like, I don't really want to. It's easier for me to just wrestle 220. Or you don't have guys
Yeah.
typically cutting down to 220. They're either like, well, if I'm 230, I'm a football guy, right? And I'm thinking about my weight. I've got to add weight. So I'm not going to cut weight to go down to 220.
Yeah.
So the population of true 220 pounders is not really there. And then on top of that, like you said, the majority of these guys, if they are athletic, they're probably going to play football at some level, you know, D3, D2, NAIA, D1. I mean, there's so many football opportunities and available that, and it's like it or not. I mean, at this point, it's our national pastime. So guys, most individuals gravitate to that mainstream sport.
Yeah. Yeah, the big guy's always going to have the ability to have multiple options in multiple sports if he's really one of the top athletes out there. Where if a guy's 119 pounds, you're not calling him. He's not saying, "Well, I'm waiting on Indiana basketball, whether they're going to make an offer to me or not. It's just not happening, right? And
Right.
it's so you can't cut those. You cannot cut those. Everyone, whoever's thinking about this, you really have to go back and think about the opportunity for small guys, what it's done for the sport of wrestling, and the duty of sports is try to make it available as much as possible to everyone. And I think I don't know why I guess I haven't been following the forfeit situation enough to suggest that that's the issue. I don't know, I guess. But you know what, too? To some extent, when you have like, I think what could be watering it down. I don't know how bad PA is, but some of these states, when they have four different levels of state championship, well, how many teams are you trying to fill up now? That's going to be a difficult situation, especially when you get down to smaller schools. There's just going to be a lack of athletes. Not everybody's going to want to wrestle. So that could be it too.
I mean, just on sheer numbers.
Yeah,
just on sheer numbers, Cary. I mean, I grew up in rural Ohio. I had a graduating class of 80, I think. So
yeah,
it's 240 people in the entire school. Cut that in half, 120 males. And of those males within, you can, there's multiple sports per season. You can see how it's really difficult to field a team, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't have a team just because you can't field it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's anyway, that was Blaze, Dean, and I were talking. It's their idea. They were the ones really throwing it at me, and Blaze was throwing it at me. But I'm like, I really like the college weight idea. That would simplify us for recruiting, get more and more people in line. I think it makes sense. I think it decreases weight cutting. I think everybody's going to be, there's always a bubble for everybody mentally, either go down or up. Like that 41, 49 gap. That's a decent gap there where somebody says, yeah, 49 is the best weight for me. Easy for us to look at a kid now and say, oh, you're wrestling 49, but you only weigh 48 on a regular basis. You got one more year of 49. So we're really looking at a 57 pounder probably down the road. And it's easier for the kid. But, you're right. Every other coaches who sign these sophomores, I used to sit there again. I'm not a sports guy. I'm a wrestling coach. And I'd be like, how do you commit to a sophomore in some of these sports? I'm like, do you know? But you're right. It's a position sport. They're not cutting weight because I wouldn't make an offer to a sophomore. Like even if we were allowed to, it would be so difficult because I'm like, I don't know where you're going to be. All of a sudden I might recruit 6 guys and everybody winds up at 165 pounds. Now what am I going to do? But for other sports, they can, and that position can change and evolve and it doesn't really hurt the team as much. But for wrestling, you're recruiting weight classes, especially if you got a limited number of people you're going to bring in every year.
Yeah. And the other thing that I just thought of, like, if anything, we should eliminate upper weights. Right. I think the lens that we're viewing this is like we're looking at wrestling and applying the normal criteria. Is like, oh, this is the normal human. This is what they weigh. This is their height. This is where they end up at. Like, no, that's the wrong criteria when you're looking at the sport of wrestling because we've got a different sample size outside of the normal. They don't fit into the norms or the bell curve of normal humans. Right. Typically, a lot of us.
Yeah.
So if anything, like you were saying, there's an abundance of opportunities for bigger people, just naturally, and in the mainstream. So why limit the opportunities for people that don't even have it to begin with? Like, why wouldn't you take away a couple more of the upper weights, or use that criteria? Like, okay, if this is a different type of athlete, like when it's like talking about running, Cary, like. Eliminating positions on a cross country team based on height, like, oh, only an average height and weight can be a runner. I'm like, no, there's a lot of little guys that typically start in running as well. So why would you say no? We're gonna, interesting stuff for sure, man. But I think this is, I think this kind of applies to what's going on right now. It's like, why are you thinking in the normal ways? Like the easiest thing is doing is like, oh, these little weights don't matter. Like cut those out. Like, no, force yourself to think differently. Don't think in the normal means of observation, right? Dig a little deeper. Think a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think they just got to go slow and make sure they know what they're doing before they make any decisions on anything. And just really look at the facts, about how it plays out. But, well, Matt, hopefully we talk again, man, in we're out of this zombie mode here for a little bit, and we're back to work. But we'll see.
Yeah,
I think we
can't
still have
wait.
about another month of it.
It's looking like it.
All right,
Looking
buddy.
like it. All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Later.